So let's start with we'll start with the definition of what fast fashion is, because as I mentioned before, I knew of the topic and I knew of the issue, but I never heard this term before, fast fashion. So what is that?
So first of all, I'm really excited that you're hearing the term now, because it's problematic and it's been going on for a really long time. But I don't think that it's a well understood term. People tend to think that it's like, oh, I can get something really cool really quickly. Well, there's a lot of implications for that. It's actually an economic approach to creating fashion that has emphasized rapid production of clothes very cheaply, and very much about keeping up with trends and fads. I've heard different big box stores, I won't name any specifically, but big box stores saying, hey, you can have 52 seasons of fashion now. That's pretty scary to somebody like me, and I think that should be scary to other people as well, that anybody would think that they should consume 52 seasons of fashion. The approach is really about maximizing profit for big companies that are producing fashion, and there are unfortunately a lot of environmental and health consequences to this, as well as human rights and human justice consequences to people that are in the supply chain. Because of this sort of consumption-oriented 52 seasons of fashion a year, people are buying, regularly buying clothes that are not well made, that the seams are not well sewn, they are cheaply produced, rapidly produced, poor fabrics, poor quality, and they are disposable. Really, it's a disposable mentality around clothing and textiles, which is not actually what clothing is supposed to be about. So what actually happens, unfortunately, is just here in the United States alone, 34 billion pounds per year are produced of textile waste. 34 billion pounds of textile waste. That's just stuff that we discard, clothing that we discard. About 70% of that 34 billion a year and growing is in landfills here in the US. So every year, 70% of 34 billion ends up in landfills here in the US. Now, that's unfortunate. That's terribly unfortunate. But I guess if there were any sort of upside to that, it would be that at least the landfills in the United States have landfill capture engineering technology that contains the gases and the damage from all of this. That is not true of all landfills in the U.S., but it is true of most. I will say that most landfills in the U.S. do end up near poor communities, marginalized communities, communities of color. So there's a huge justice, environmental and human injustice component to that as well, right here in the U.S. So 70% straight to the landfill. Another 15% gets incinerated.
Into the air.
Into the air, right? We know that air quality has an enormous relationship to health, cardiovascular health, respiratory health. So we're literally burning up our desire to have all these different, disposable fashion items and putting it into the air and hurting ourselves. The other approximate 15%, so we got 70, 15, and 15, the other 15% is supposedly donated. And I use, air quotes around that because in theory, it's being recycled, right? Which, I used to do. I came, at it from a place of kindness when I was driving off to the Salvation Army box or putting bags out for the Vietnam Veterans of America or the Epilepsy Foundation or Planet Aid or it all comes from a place of genuine goodness in the heart, but unfortunately the education around it isn't as advanced as it should be, so people don't know what actually happens. And that's why my team and I are here to tell a story of what really happens. The 15% that is, supposedly recycled, actually about half of that gets shipped over to countries in the global south. So if you think about everything that gets donated to, these different organizations and thrift stores, only about half of that is even potentially sold here in the U.S. to somebody who's in an upcycling, green economy kind of mode. The other half is immediately shipped over abroad. The United States, the United Kingdom, and South Korea send the most textile waste to the global South.
Wow.
One of our latest papers that will be coming out this year is on the global trade around textile waste, and we discovered that we knew that the U.S. and the U.K. were big producers of shipping textile waste abroad, but we didn't realize that South Korea was actually number 3.
So with so many people out in the world currently doing this, and I know there's an effort to try to educate people and try to find ways to be able to reuse and without it ending up in a landfill, in the air, or in other impoverished areas. With so many people out there, just the numbers wise, at the moment, like, is there a feeling of like hopelessness, or is there hope that? No,
there's hope. There's hope. First of all, I think the fact that we're talking about it right now is hopeful. We have, as I said earlier, we have sort of this scientific route that we're going with the bioreactor simulators that show like water and air quality damage. We have the art advocacy approach, which we're promoting with the Aftermath sculpture, which is traveling around the U.S. We have the research approach, which is publications in different journals that are, the next one will be coming out hopefully in the Journal of Environmental Health. The last one came out in Waste Management. We have a third one that's in process. We're really hoping that the conversation is going to be elevated to a place where other stakeholders are going to get involved, and there are a lot of stakeholders in this process to address it. We can't do it. My colleague D.L. Lundberg said we can't recycle our way out of this issue. It's very much structural. It's very much going to be something that has to be addressed with policy. Some of the countries in Europe are starting to have policies around like sort of the life cycle of a textile and the responsibility of the producer to that, which I think is an interesting construct, and I think it's something that we need to explore here more in the United States. And I won't tell the UK what to do, but
I don't believe it's in the U.S., but I heard also in European countries where plastic producers that they're being held or they're trying to be more tightly regulated, because a lot of the materials from like fast food to what name it, there's plastic, and a lot of that blame gets shifted to the people who are buying these products, but not directed towards the companies that are producing this and packaging it in that.
Correct, and there does need to be a business lifespan of a product responsibility, and I know Spain is starting to do that with textiles. I believe France is doing that with textiles, so that if you're producing, and I don't mean to call out H&M, but if you're an H&M or a Zara or one of those types of stores, you have some sort of responsibility to this clothing that you are producing and selling and putting out there into the environment. Mm-hmm. So that is starting to take hold. There's a growing movement around that. The problem with sending all of this textile waste abroad is that, and I started out with saying that the landfill systems here in the U.S. are more advanced, is that the stuff that we send abroad doesn't really end up having, you imagine your T-shirt having another life in another part of the world, and that's not actually what happens. Most of it ends up in landfills there. The stuff that doesn't end up in landfills is putting seamstresses and tailors and textile manufacturers in those parts of the world out of business. So there's a cultural impact and negative knock on different countries around the world and their own clothing makers and their own basically designs and businesses. And then aside from that part being this human violation, there's an environmental violation too, because it goes into the landfills there and there isn't the gas capture and the water damage protection technologies. It actually is much worse as it sits in landfills over there. It produces more environmental impacts for people and animals and land and water systems around there. And it's an enormous and growing problem. And, we haven't We haven't taken up enough of an educational mission around this in the country, in the U.S. yet.
Yeah, and I don't think a lot of people realize that even clothing can, like as you said, release gases eventually down through various processes. Can you talk about like that in a nutshell? Like, yeah, that is a thing that does happen. People don't maybe think about it or know about it.
People never think about it. That's why we developed the bioreactor simulators. We were like, this is your T-shirt. This is the gas coming out of your T-shirt as it's decomping in a landfill. This is what happens, as when the rain falls on it and it goes through, your decomposing pair of jeans in a landfill, outside of Accra, Ghana. This is exactly what's happening, and measurable sensors on the bioreactor that can tell, if one T-shirt is doing this, if one pair of jeans is doing this, can you imagine what 34 billion pounds are doing per year?
It may not be good for the environment, or it may not be well thought. What would you say to somebody who says, I need new clothes for my children, this is affordable right now, I can't invest in more high quality garments and things like that? What would you say to somebody who thinks this is their only option?
Yeah, well, we've thought a lot about that, actually, because we think about it with food too, right? Fast food, fast fashion, there's actually a lot of similarities that are pulled through across the analysis. With someone that says, this is, a cheap thing that I can afford, first I'd like to make sure that we acknowledge that the people that are actually contributing the most to textile waste generation are wealthy people. So they're the ones who are creating the problem. And according to research that I did, that the team did in the 2021 publication, people with higher incomes actually generate 76% more textile waste than people with lower incomes. So the onus is really on the people who are consuming at this rapid rate and have more money to do so.
Is the reasoning because they may be able to okay, I bought this, I can just toss and buy something else new, as opposed to somebody who's maybe from a lower income, they want to hold on to it for as long as possible.
Exactly. It is the people who have the wealthier incomes who are, 76% of the textile waste is coming from those folks. So it's not people with, middle tier and low incomes that are creating this problem. And as I said earlier, the problem, the waste part of it, the post-consumer part, not only do the wealthier people produce it, but then they offload it into communities in landfills that are of lower income. So they're creating the problem of fast fashion, and then they're creating the waste problem of it in the communities that are marginalized and least empowered. The onus really is on the people who are consuming at this rapid rate. And as a team, we have always tried to be incredibly clear about our messaging around that this isn't directed at people with lower incomes who are, just trying to have something to wear. It's nice to have something to wear, right? Especially in the Northeast. Right now I'm wearing, this is a upcycled dress, upcycled tights, upcycled boots and socks. But this is a sweater that I bought. And I bought
for those at home, upcycled. Can you define that?
I bought it in thrifting.
Okay,
right.
Perfect. I wasn't quite sure what upcycle meant.
Yeah, upcycled. I wanted it to have another cycle of its life. Mm-hmm. But I did buy this sweater, right? So there are things that you need to buy. Every once in a while, you do need to buy new clothes. We're not saying don't buy new clothes. We're not saying, people should go without. We're saying that there's a mentality around consumption and fast fashion that's creating problems for people who don't have a lot of power, who don't have a lot of money, and their health and their well-being. And the places where they live, the environments that they live in, are being harmed by that kind of behavior. I think that there are alternatives to fast fashion, and I really want to emphasize that you can reuse something, right? You talked about your wife, and this is years and years old, but it's good quality. The seams are good. I have a colleague here at Boston College, Jackie Lerner, who's just a lovely human being, wonderful woman, great role model, And she introduced me to, this brand of clothes that it does not break down. So I'm like, okay, well, that's part of my ethical closet. I want to build an ethical closet, or I want to try to help other people do that. We do emphasize reusing clothes. You can clothes swap, trades. Any school could be doing like clothes swaps. I don't know if you know this or if I mentioned it, but all of the clothes in the Aftermath sculpture were collected over just a matter of days here at Boston College before Thanksgiving one year, and so many of them have the price tags on them. And it was all just like, a couple of days of clothing, and we have so many that all of the stuff that we collected, we can't even put into the sculpture. There's just too much of it, and that's just a couple of days at one school.
Do for the sculpture, are there still pieces of clothing that have the price tag on there?
Many,
because that's a powerful image as well.
That's what I'm saying. Many pieces of clothing in that sculpture have the price tag right on them. And, I've had people go up to the sculpture and say, hey, can I take this? I'm like, no, leave it there for now. But, I think one of my ultimate goals would be at the very end of Aftermath's life, my colleague, and I want to make sure that he's credited here, Mark Cooper, who's the sculptor and who really is just this incredible artistic genius. One of our visions is to have it go to Burning Man. And then have people take all the clothes, and then we'll just burn the wood sculpture that it's on underneath as like the aftermath of the aftermath. But it's actually a lot cheaper to reuse clothes and buy upcycled clothes and go to clothing swaps than to consume fast fashion, if you think about it. And it's better for the environment. So that's what I'd say about that, the question about what would I say to somebody that didn't have a lot of money. I think that there are tons and tons of great ways to have good, decent clothing. My mother-in-law is a thrifter, I'll tell you. That woman can find the best clothes in thrift shops. She goes into thrift stores in Boston and New Hampshire, all over the place, and she gets the most amazing stuff. And, it's just nice to see that you don't have to go out and, be part of the problem. You can be part of the solution.
Because I know you talked about the amount of clothing that's dumped, whether it's in the U.S. or overseas or across the country or down south. Do you also look at, say the thrift store, for example? A lot of people donate a lot of clothing there, and it'd be hard to imagine that they are able to sell or even stock or put on the racks every piece of clothing. And so a lot of that, you're saying, also gets eventually dumped if it doesn't sell, if it doesn't end up on the rack?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Thrift stores receive way more clothing donations in this country because of fast fashion than they can possibly sell. So, even with the greatest intentions in thrift stores, and I love thrift stores too, there's just too much that's being donated because of the fast fashion consumption for the thrift store to even be able to sell it. Now that might change as we, shift the paradigm around upcycling and green economy and, reusing clothing. And but at this point, the thrift stores can't even possibly sell all the clothes that are being donated, which then ends up with about 50% of what they receive as donations gets shipped abroad. And when I say shipped abroad, I mean dumped abroad.
And for the Aftermath sculpture, can you tell me, for our listeners, can you describe it? And then, two, it's on this amazing journey, or it has been and will continue to be on this amazing journey. Can you go over that too? Yeah.
So Aftermath, first of all, it's, there's a website with lots of pictures, and we're actually having a virtual conference in April, which I'll send you the link to. I don't know if you can share it, but we're inviting everyone to join the virtual conference. It's April 13th, and we'll be talking about what to do. What do you do with fast fashion? What do you do in terms of addressing textile waste, and really coming at it from a multi-stakeholder perspective. But as far as Aftermath goes, Aftermath made its debut during the pandemic. And like I said, this was the clothing that ended up in Aftermath is only a small portion of what was collected over a matter of days, and it debuted in the McMullen Museum of Art here at Boston College in January of 21. I believe it was January 21, and it was there in the McMullen Museum, and then from the McMullen Museum, it gained a lot of attention and attraction. So it was invited to go to the Smithsonian in D.C. to the Accelerate Innovation Festival, where it went in the spring of 22, and about 11,000 people a day saw it there at the Innovation Festival. A lot of schools did tours of the Innovation Festival, so we had a lot of grade school and middle school and high school students actually looking at Aftermath and engaging with it. From the Smithsonian, it was there for a 3-day festival, and then it went, this past fall, it went over to the Boston University Medical School campus. Boston University became interested in it. They've been doing a lot in their School of Public Health around this kind of work. And so it was there on the medical school campus for a while. And then it traveled over to the Charles River campus to an art building at the Boston University Charles River campus, where it was for another period of time. Now it is currently, it's taking a break, and it will then be going out to the University of Washington in Seattle, where it will be on display out there. And then it will return to the East Coast, where it will be at a university in Virginia. It's also been invited to different schools. The Fashion Institute of Technology in New York, Mass College of Art and Design is interested in having it, is in conversations about having it. So we expect it to have a long afterlife.
Have any students said, like, okay, well, before you take it to Burning Man, potentially, and it's taken, like, can I grab that sweater really quick before? Has anybody ever called dibs on anything?
No. Shockingly, some of the kids that saw it in the Smithsonian were like, I want that T-shirt. But no, the BC kids haven't come back to reclaim their clothes yet. No, they were doing it as a donation. Mm-hmm. So. I wonder what we could collect over a longer period of time. That would be something to measure as well.
No, and great. Again, art is meant for discussion and to spur ideas and to spread ideas, and it's a great way to do it.
Well, we believe that the art life of Aftermath is an educational tool for the community. We have a website called textilewastefacts.com that has educational modules on it too, so that people can go there. They're really brief. They're great little tutorials about what actually happens. Mm-hmm. When Aftermath, and you'll see this in some of the pictures, when Aftermath was over at BU, we incorporated these protest signs into it that have QR codes that take you to different pockets of information. So it's a really funky visual now. And we have a documentary that actually runs in the background over to the side next to Aftermath that talks about sort of what's going on, how it impacts people, and some of the solutions. It's equipoise. There are lots of ways for us to get there to solve this. It is a complex problem. It's in the British version, it's a wicked problem, but that doesn't mean that we can't make progress on this. And I think, I see new designers even using upcycled material to create new designs. There's a guy at RISD who will take all these old fabrics and create a new jacket or new pants out of it. People do see their clothes as part of their identity, and we certainly don't want, to thwart or impede that in any way. We just want to make sure that the planet and the rest of the people are okay in the process.
Excellent. And RISD?
Rhode Island School of Design.
Okay, excellent.
RISD, yeah.
No, that's good. For those at home who may not know what that is, including myself.
Sorry.
No worries.
You know what? And then I had to think, what's the I? Oh, Rhode Island.
Well, let's see. Well, I think we covered a lot and a lot of the bullet points. Is there anything that maybe forgetting to ask?
I guess my tips would be, I would, my team, again, DL Lundberg, out there in Washington State, Mark Cooper here in Boston, my undergrads and my grad students, everyone. I also want to say that a lot of the innovation that we've been doing with the Aftermath sculpture, because Aftermath itself as a sculpture has evolved. The first time we exhibited, it was the platform and the clothing. The second time, it had some technical components. It had the video and it had different interactive pieces. The third and fourth times, it had the signs and the QR codes and the digital connections. We had iPads where you could engage with different topics. And for that, I really want to thank the Provost's office here at Boston College, in particular Sunan Bhattacharya, who's the Design and Innovation Provost here, and his colleague Tom Childs, who's a Provost for Research, because they really encouraged and mentored and guided us to include more of that in the sculpture to make it more interactive. So I would encourage people to not just look at it as this amazing, I mean, it's, to be honest, James, it's really beautiful, but it's also really ugly. And that's the point. It's like we want people to say, wow, it's huge, it's massive, it's colorful, it's cool, it's horrible, right? Like that's the moment that we want. So I would encourage people to reduce their own consumption. Just start small. Try to commit to reusing something or giving it to a friend or, figuring out another way to use it before you go out and have to buy something else. And then I really do think that we need to have policies that are going to address the political and structural inequities. There are countries that have tried to ban these imports of discarded textiles because it does hurt their own economies, and it does hurt their land and people, and they have been thwarted in their efforts to ban these imports, again, air quotes. So that's a problem we need to address.
This was a very informative. I learned a lot about this issue in the textile industry. Great. Well, I think that's, unless there's anything else you want to add.
Please join us for the LEAPS conference, LEAPS conference, virtual conference here at Boston College on April 13th. I will give James the website and information, and come to the sculpture website, come to the Textile Waste Facts website and learn everything you can, because you will then do the next right thing.